In conversation with Shuk Garcia. Shuk Garcia is a founder of Climb Leadership International and coaches executive worldwide on public speaking, emotional intelligence, and executive presence. His clients include the world's largest financial institutions and technology companies. He's also a professional speaker and author of The Moment That Defines Your Life and the Amazon bestseller A Climb to the Top. He's on the faculty at Columbia University, Graduate School of Engineering, and teaches in the Professional Development and Leadership Program. Shook is also a passionate and accomplished mountaineer. He formerly spent 25 years in leadership position at Bloomberg, BlackRock, and Citadel Investment Management. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy and excitement to have on the show today, Shook Garcia. How are you doing, Shook?
Very well, Peter. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
I'm very excited we're here really to talk about your book. It's quite exciting.
Yeah.
We're here to
Yeah.
sit on it and I'm excited we're here. Thanks for coming on.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, yeah. So Shuk, I would like us, one of us say that I found the description page of your book, A Climb to the Top, Communication and Leadership Tactics to Take on Your Career to New Heights, which I think is quite beautiful because from reading your bio, I can see that you're such amazing leadership. You've got a book in that category, which I think everybody needs actually to have a big, successful business, etc. Now, I would like to ask you how this book came about. What inspired you to write A Climb to the Top? And how do you even come up with that title for a book cover?
Yeah. Well, I can say, for context, as you read my bio, I am a career Wall Streeter. I
Yeah.
spent about 30 years working in the arena of finance and globally. I was all over the world representing the interest of these amazing
Wow.
companies. But I say I never envisioned it because something happened along the way that changed me, that changed my view of the world. And on 9/11, September 11th, 2001, an historical day, I was scheduled to speak on the 107th floor of the World Trade Center in New York.
Oh,
For
wow.
those who may not be familiar with New York, you probably remember 9/11, planes hit the north and south tower of the World Trade Center at approximately 9 o'clock that morning. Originally, I was scheduled to speak on the 107th floor at 9:20 a.m. in the North Tower. A couple of months before, and for context, my job was at the time for Bloomberg his professional spokesman. I stood on stages around the world and I communicated to an audience something that was valuable to them and that was a good branding opportunity for my company.
Wow.
In that job, there was in the World Trade Center in the North Tower, there was an event space that happened to be very high up. And 2 months before we locked down the schedule so that on 9/11 I was going to speak at 9:20, instead, a colleague of mine on the speaking circuit that worked for an investment bank, he was scheduled at 3:20. He
Wow.
called me and actually the London based conference producer called the Risk Waters Group to communicate that he was no longer available at 3:20. And he asked me if I would switch with him. So his name is Scott. Scott was scheduled to speak at 9:20. I was scheduled to speak at 3:20. The sad part, Peter, and this is where the change occurred, when the planes hit, Peter perished in the buildings. That was supposed to be me. Because if
Wow.
I hadn't taken that phone call and if I hadn't accommodated his request to change the time, I would have been in the World Trade Center and I wouldn't be speaking to you right now.
Oh, wow.
The people in my company, including my family, thought I was in the World Trade Center when they collapsed. I had made an entry on the Bloomberg calendar, which is visible to all employees, that I was at the World Trade Center. People had no evidence or basis to think that I was anywhere else. So when the planes hit, every company in New York started to account for its employees. And sadly, there were 4 people that were unaccounted for and presumed dead. I was one of them.
Wow.
The 3 other people were did perish, and they were young Bloomberg employees at the age of 24, and they were
Wow.
there to support my speaking engagement. And sadly, at that very young age, they died when the buildings collapsed. So,
Wow.
what inspired me, Peter, the reason I provided that background, it was in those moments of introspection when I ask myself, why was this not my day to die?
Mm.
Is there a greater message? Why was I not there at 9:20 because of the simple twist of fate that a friend of mine calls and asks me to change the time? Who knew? So the sad part about that, and maybe this was the opportunity, Peter, I didn't have an answer to the question. I said, I'm married, I had 4 children, so my children are obviously critical to me. But when I went home, I couldn't explain to them, why, Dad, what happened? They thought I was dead. And so it set me, Peter, on a course of self discovery, of
Wow.
introspection, and not knowing and not having any blueprint or precedent for answering the question, what do I do with this? So now, to make a short story even longer, I'll get to the point. It was in that introspection that I thought about, what are the things that I thought about doing that I never did? One day I'm going to die, and I'd like to think that I'm going to die with no regrets.
Mm.
So that introspection led me, while around that time I had read a couple important books. One of them was called Into Thin Air, which accounted for a disaster, a mountain climbing disaster in which many people died in 1996. And
Mm.
at the same time, just after that, although there was no relation, I read a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which recounted his time in Auschwitz, in the death camp in Germany. And it was an incredible book that helped me to become more thoughtful and philosophical about trying to figure out why I'm still alive. And
Mm.
so I gravitated to the mountains. I said, there's something I've always thought about doing. And exactly 1 year later, on 9/11/02, I stood on the summit of New York, of the U.S.'s lower 48 highest mountain called Mount Rainier. And I did it to honor the spirit of all of my friends that I had lost on 9/11.
Wow.
And I didn't know what else to do. I said, what am I doing here? Maybe if I can climb this mountain, get away from everything, maybe I'll have clarity to the way that I'm thinking about how I'm going to spend the rest of my life.
Mm.
And from Mount Rainier, it was such a wonderful experience. I
Wow.
didn't know whether I was climbing to find myself, to lose myself, didn't know where it was going to take me, but it led me ultimately to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. That was my second mountain. Then I climbed the
Wow.
Matterhorn. Then I climbed all over the world. Now I'm a mountaineer. And what I thought about in retrospect when I decided to start my own company and teach at Columbia University,
Mm.
I made the conscious decision, Peter, to go home. Here on in, I'm going to wake up in the service of other people's success. Don't need to do it for myself. I'm very, very happy with what I had done so far in the service of my success. Now I'm going to flip the model. And
Wow.
what I recognized is through time, I knew that people who communicated exceedingly well, and I would like to think I was one of them, they rose to the top of their professions. And the reason I called it a climb to the top, there was a common thread that the people who rose to the top, I used then a climb to the top as a metaphor for how to climb careers, but instead of using the ice axe and crampons that I would use to ascend a mountain, it's
Mm.
the communication skills that I had developed over many years and that wonderful gift that I was given to become the spokesman, where it came very clear to me. I know exactly what I'm going to call this book, A Climb
Mm.
to the Top. And
Wow.
hence, it is a leadership communication book, not a mountaineering book, but I couldn't help but think to put all that mountaineering influence both into the title and into the narrative of the way that I teach.
Wow. That's quite a lot, really. I love your take on this, Shuk.
Yeah, thank
Quite
you.
beautiful, quite amazing. And to know that you escaped the World Trade incident, that's such a testimony. I mean, I'm excited we are here, that you can
Yeah,
even
thank
tell
you.
that story alone. It's quite
Good point.
historical because
Yeah.
that was such a terrible incident. Very,
Oh
very
my
sad.
God. And I still think about it every day, Peter. I live in New York. I go by that area often. It is completely redone. But for 10 years, we lived the devastation of those buildings collapse because they were such a key part of the New York skyline.
Mm,
And in a moment, in about a minute, they were gone. This completely collapsed. And New York didn't look the same.
mm,
And so I think about it often, how lucky I am, how grateful I am. But I used it as an opportunity to find myself, to
mm,
recognize I can do something else in the world that is incredibly fulfilling. I just don't have to go to Wall Street to do it. But once I made that conscious decision that I can teach people to do the things that I did,
mm.
this has been an incredible 10 years. I haven't worked a day in 10 years. And I think that's the way I see it now, because it is such an honor and a pleasure and a tremendous responsibility to be able to help others to help themselves. And that's how I spend my days.
That's great. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'd also
You're
like to
welcome.
ask you, yeah, why did you leave a thriving Wall Street career to, become an author? What prompted you to become a two-time author?
Yeah. Well, even though I never thought about writing my first book, it was pretty important to me that once I started my business climb leadership, when you write a book, and so for so many of the books that I've read that had an impact on me have become a part of me. I
Mm,
think about the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, Man's
yeah.
Search for Meaning. Many of those books are very different themes, how important they were to my development. So as I thought about how can I maximize my capacity to be able to do the same thing for other people who are readers like me. And
Mm,
I didn't just read these books like a novel. I open it and I close it. I became those books. I am the sum of the books that are important to me.
mm,
And so I said, how do I replicate that? Well, I'm now in a business. I'm now teaching at Columbia, and I didn't have a blueprint for my teaching methods. So I said, I've got to put this in a book. And the framework of my book, and I'll hold this book up just very briefly here,
yeah.
but it
Beautiful
climbed.
cover you've got too.
Yeah, thank you. And the framework is a toolkit. It's called the 10 Commandments of Great Communicators. I grew up a
Mm,
Catholic kid. I learned the 10 Commandments. It was always in my mind and in my heart. And I thought about what are the methods by which I teach? Well, I teach rhetorical techniques. I teach people to do what we're doing now. And I put it into a frame of 10 rhetorical tools. Those are the tactics. So when one communicates, one of the tactics is called the power of the pause, just like you and I are doing right now. That is an example of one of them,
yeah.
where when you teach people that, they had no idea. Oh, I can pause? Yes. And here's why.
Mm,
So the book then, Peter, was my opportunity to put my work into a book. It was very good one for to give to my clients and to
wow.
everyone reads it that works with me, to bring it to Columbia University to my students. And also when you're an author, authorship, authority, there is a branding thing. You know you're an author as well. It's important. And people perceive you as maybe this guy knows what he's talking about. So
Mm,
my first book was consistent with how I began my business. The second book is the emotional companion to the first, and it's called The Moment That Defines Your Life. And it took me many years to write it because it's a very different subject. When people hire me or when I go to Columbia on campus, they count on me to teach two things:
wow.
public speaking from a climb to the top, and the social science called emotional intelligence. And
Mm,
what I did then for my book, The Moment That Defines Your Life, very similar in colors and design,
yeah.
it combines the modern social science of emotional intelligence with
Wow.
the ancient philosophy of Stoicism.
Oh, beautiful.
And I did that because through my introspective self discovery journey, Peter, I found this philosophy. I'm not religious. I'm not one of those that goes to the Bible or turns to Jesus. I respect other people that do. I'm just not one of them. So I try to find, is there a guiding light? Is there a Jesus for me? And I
Mm,
read a book called The Meditations, written by the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. I wish I had read it earlier in my life.
yeah.
And it had an immense impact on how I thought about the world. And it
Wow.
described this philosophy, and he was the ultimate philosopher, practicing philosopher of this thing called Stoicism. So I became that, and I followed Marcus Aurelius, and thank God he wrote that, because
Wow.
that book then, as I teach emotional intelligence, I integrate something old, an ancient philosophy, with something new, a social science. I put them together and teach people this perspective of human behavior and leadership through the lens of a philosopher, through the lens of a Wall Streeter, through the lens of a mountaineer. I tried to find a unique way to communicate that.
That's quite amazing to know, really. I mean, I enjoy your answer to these questions.
Thank
They've
you.
been
I
quite
appreciate that.
exciting, they've been quite great, and I love it wholeheartedly. Now, you also have another book in the name of The Moment That Defines Your Life, integrating emotional intelligence and stoicism when your life, career, and family are on the line, which I think you just mentioned, yeah?
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
like you to tell us briefly about some of the themes encapsulated in it, and also some of the themes we'd look forward to picking up a climb to the top.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And when I considered writing The Moment That Defines Your Life, it
Yeah.
was written 8 years after a climb to the top. And when I asked myself, what did I learn in those 8 years? And this is why the book is important. It came to me, Peter, as I thought about my educational model. And I thought about now I'm teaching college. I teach in the Graduate School of Engineering. I teach at Columbia. I teach engineers and scientists, public speaking and emotional intelligence. But what did I find? In those 8 years, Peter, I came to a very big conclusion when it comes to people who succeed,
Mm.
that we overestimate the importance of intellect, as if somehow that correlates to happiness and prosperity. Not a bad thing. I like hanging around intelligent people, but I feel that many people, because of their brilliance, they believe that that by itself it brings good judgment.
Mm.
It may, but it may not. Anyway, here's why I'm saying this. What I concluded is we overestimate the intellect and we underestimate,
Mm.
particularly in leadership positions, under the weight of pressure and expectations, we underestimate the importance
Wow.
of our temperament. That's one. And two, the capacity to self correct under the weight of that pressure. And it was interesting to me in my Wall Street career, the great leaders are the calm under pressure. They're good at making decisions under the weight of a lot of heavy circumstances. That
Mm.
doesn't correlate to IQ. It's a behavior. And we see it in the athletes. Who's the guy you want to give the football to in the final second to kick it? It may not be the best kicker. It may be the individual whose mindset is stable under the weight of 50,000 Manchester United fans screaming at that soccer player. And so the reason I wrote it, I found over the years, I was helping more and more people not just publicly speak, I was helping them learn the science of emotional intelligence to
Wow.
become more self aware and to become more social aware, and blending it in with this philosophy to recognize to the majority of people that I work with who want to control everything, including the weather, there's only one thing you can control. You. That's it. Don't even think about trying to control your spouse, your children, your work, the weather. And yet they do. So
Mm.
they burn a tremendous amount of unproductive psychic energy on the wrong things and then wonder why they're not succeeding and living up to their potential. And that's what the book is about.
Oh, wow. That's sort of beautiful, amazing, lovely, quite charming illustration and themes you've got in there. I mean, I'm intrigued really by the subject line, but most of the things you've mentioned so far. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing.
Well, you're welcome. And I thought this was another unexpected book, but it came from the observations. What am I seeing out there? Who am I teaching? What am I coaching? What are the
Yeah,
observations by which I could write a book to help people get ahead of this rather than waiting for the world to change or for you to lose your temper or to get fired because you couldn't control yourself?
yeah,
There's a lot of anxiety and a lot of mental disorder and
yeah.
very smart people who are very depressed. And what happens? It changes their behaviors. And if you
Mm.
don't have a model or a blueprint, absent taking medication, which I appreciate, some people do, that's not my approach. I think so many of the problems can be solved if we treat learning emotional intelligence with
Mm.
the same rigor and discipline that we learn math and
Yeah,
science and everything else, but we don't.
absolutely.
Many people just dismiss it as irrelevant. And I said,
Mm.
that's crazy.
That's crazy.
my God, we succeed and we fail based on our behavior as much as, if not more, than our technical competence.
Yeah.
Most people are competent. They're very good at what they do, but
Yeah.
that doesn't guarantee success.
Yeah.
Your behavior matters. How you show
Matters.
up, how you communicate, and that's what when I put these two books together, I think about what is my contribution to the world. It's tactical, a climb to the top. It's emotional, the moment that defines your life, and these serve my conclusions about how do you succeed. Well, you got to be really good at what you do, but
Yeah.
that's not enough. That's only half of the formula. That's left
Yeah.
brain. The right brain is communication,
Yeah.
collaboration, empathy, those things that I think so many people take for granted, sadly. Not me, and not anybody in my gravity. We do not take them for granted. We take them seriously.
I love that so much. I love that so much. So beautiful, so great, and so impressive. Now,
Thank you.
I know that you have such a beautiful theme and subject lines and even genre that you've written in. But then
Yeah.
I want us to go into the conversation of feedbacks and criticism. One of the most interesting things to me as a writer is to sit back and listen to readers' feedbacks. And you may want to agree with me that one of the things that makes literature to be a bit complex is the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different readers based on their
Yeah.
opinions. And sometimes the readers might get a message intended by the author. Sometimes they might not get the message. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message. Sometimes they might be very far away from getting the message, say several miles, several kilometers or meters away from getting the message. And hilariously, even without playing, the author made the book to be quite simple enough. They can still go ahead and misunderstand the book and interpret it upside down. As hilariously fun as they sound, I would like to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your works differently than you intended? How does that make you feel?
Yeah. Well, as to how I feel, I think it's a wonderful thing.
Mm,
Even I think as authors, it's important that we open up our minds to the fact that the people that are reading us do interpret it differently. And I don't think that misinterpretation is something that I see as right or wrong. I'm
mm,
really glad when people have an alternative opinion because we live in a world where we are open to the diversity, to the inclusion. We have to act that way. We can't just say, oh my God, the guy didn't get it. I will never blame the reader for misinterpreting me. In fact, if
mm.
I had to say, I'm going to take responsibility for, let's just say, not getting it right. Maybe that's the way to put it. So you don't know, and Peter, you know, as an author, you don't know, you have no idea what said A and they read B. What? You
Mm.
can't imagine how. So there is a principle that I live by, and it's one of
Wow.
the seven principles in Stephen Covey's The Seven Habits of Highly Successful People. And I say this to myself every day, and it is the following:
Mm.
seek first to understand, then to be understood. So
Wow.
think about the sequence of this really simple principle. I
Yeah.
first have to understand when a reader comes to me and misinterprets me. It
Mm.
is my opportunity to open my mind and find out why.
Wow.
Rather than dismissing them and say, well, that's not what I meant, I go into the Socratic method and I ask the questions. Okay, tell me why. Tell me what you felt. Tell me how you read it. I think it's beautiful
Yeah.
because I think for all of us, it helps me to be a better writer. Next time,
Yeah.
I'm going to recognize, okay, you got something else that you think that's cool, so I bring it on. And when the Amazon reviews, there's so many reviews and Goodreads and Amazon for my books. It's lovely on all fronts. They're telling me something, either validating the very reason I did it, or they're teaching me something. Hey, Chuck, you said this. Well, here's how I got it. Okay. Well, maybe I could have done that differently. So
That's
everything
amazing.
is an opportunity to me.
Mm. Oh, wow.
And I don't take the criticism personally. In fact, I try to accept it, to make it a learning opportunity because as authors, we're teaching them. But I think the
Mm.
best thing that we can do is recognize they're teaching us, and we're all each other's teachers.
That's amazing. I love your take on that, really. I mean,
Thank you.
it's quite beautiful, it's quite amazing, and I think that's actually a very nice idea. Hearing someone interpreting your book a bit slightly from what you intended, be like, oh, okay, really? Well,
Yeah.
I never saw it that way in that angle, but thank you for spotting that out.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful feeling, Yeah, it's amazing. Thanks for the
Well,
response.
do you feel the same?
I do
What
feel the
was it like
same.
the first time someone said to you, Peter, "Oh, you said A, and here's how I took it." What did you do?
Yeah, I just started laughing. I was like, oh, okay,
Right, that's a good
interesting.
response.
You know, I was like, that's such a beautiful one, really. Well, thank you. But, you can't explain yourself to everybody. You
Right.
understand? There's no way. Okay, take for instance, happen to be and we're all on an international author of, say, 20 million copies sold or 50 million copies sold. And at each person that comes back to say, oh, this is what you're trying to say. This is what they're trying to say. You can't go and meet all of them and try to explain yourself again. It's
Yeah.
impossible. You've done
Yeah.
the job. It is
Right.
left for them to do the interpretation in
Right.
their own way, in the way that fits them the most, in the way that they feel it's right to their own face and understanding. So
Yeah.
we've done the job, we just move on and, accept everything with some excitement, with a grain of salt, with, fold your hands and sit back and laugh. Grab a cup of coffee and enjoy the feedbacks.
Well, that's a good point. I would rather get a response than nothing. Even
Yeah,
if the response is a
absolutely.
surprise, many
Yeah,
people have read my books and didn't comment on it. Okay. And
yeah,
when I ask them, how was the book? Oh, it was great. What'd you get out of it? Well, I got this, that, and the other. And they moved on to the next book.
yeah.
Others, oh my God, I've received some 2, 3 pages. Chuck, here's what I found. Here's my learning outcomes. Here's what you said. And I love when a reader says, hey, Chuck, in chapter 3, page 13, you said, that's when you know someone has just really taken that book
Read
seriously.
it. Yeah.
And you now create a dialogue. I'm now putting myself in the shoes of the reader. The
Mm,
reader is putting himself, herself in the shoes of the author.
yeah.
This is literature. This is the theme of your show. This is what I do. This is why we write books, so that we can get a reaction to teach each other and
Mm,
recognize they've got something that we can learn from them. There's
absolutely.
one of us and 20 million readers. Hell, I'll take any small fraction of those readers, because I'm going to write another book one day as you are. And
Yeah.
what did we learn on this journey that could make us better writers? And the
Mm,
only way to do that is get out of the vacuum,
absolutely.
bring humility, be humble and kind about our approach to what people are telling us, and try to do better.
Oh, well, I love your take on that. It's so beautiful,
Yeah,
so
thank you.
amazing, so great. And I can go on and on and on and on and on.
I'm just very privileged and I'm very blessed, and I've got a loyal following out there, and
Wow.
clients and students, and I I I, I never expected this was going to be a part of my life plan, Peter.
Oh,
And I've
interesting.
been at it for 10 years, and it goes to show the power of the mind and our
Yeah,
ability to adapt to the emotional component of what happened to us and what happened to me.
absolutely.
I don't know if 9/11, although I don't question this often because it's pointless, but if 9/11 hadn't happened, maybe I'd still be on Wall Street. I don't know. We can't rewind that one, but every day we can question what is the value and the contribution we're bringing. Because at this point in my career, I have a totally different objective. It's fulfillment, it's knowing I've done the best in the service of others. For
Mm,
30 years, I never thought that way. I woke up, I got to make money, I got a family to feed. I don't have that problem. But, or that, it's not a problem. I don't have to think that way anymore.
mm,
And what Wall Street brought me was the capacity to determine my own fate.
mm,
I was looking for time and mobility, and sitting down and writing a book takes a lot of time, and
absolutely.
you got to move, and also it takes a village. I'm very glad for the editors that came into my life. My publishers were great. It
Mm,
is a wonderful way to collaborate. It's also very personal, and it's important. And I'm so glad I'm here. If you had told me 10 years ago, nah, that's impossible. So that's the beauty of it.
yeah. Oh, wow. That's quite beautiful to know, really. Thank you. Thank you for your
Well, you,
take.
what led you to even write a book? Why did you do it?
Yeah, well, I think I was following my inner mind, and then I started writing 2019 during when I had some terrible life happenings in my life, upside down, and I thought, oh, I think So whenever I had some issues, I'll just go sit down, go into my room, and pick up my pen and start writing. Even though I had no idea what I was doing, I never knew they were called poetry. I would just sit down and write. And I realized
Yeah.
that those writing are quite therapeutic for me.
Yeah.
It's more like I'm easing my emotion. When I wrote those things down, then I feel much better. It
Yeah.
feels as if it feels as if those books are writing. I'm like I'm speaking to somebody, and it's
Right.
very therapeutic. So I was
Right.
like, oh, this is quite nice to do. So whenever I have this truckload of emotions in me, I'll go inside, lock myself up, and write those things. So over and over again, I keep compiling them. Then I began to share them on social media. And when people read
Yeah.
it, they're like, wow, that's so deep.
Right. That's so cool. You can share it. Keep sharing.
Then yeah, then
Yeah.
the idea never even occurred to me that I should write a book. It was through comment of people that say, wow, you've always been sharing amazing poem. I think you should compile them into a book. And I was like, oh, okay, really? So I can compile them into books. How do I go about that? I mean, I was so clueless. Then I
Yeah.
was just
None of us know
following
what we're doing. We close our eyes and hope for the best.
I was just following the old moving and I was just going. So it's very beautiful. It's very amazing. And today we've got six, and I still have more screaming on my head. Write me, write me, write me.
Yeah.
I'm like, please, 1 minute, please. I need to rest a bit. You know.
Well, your point is an important one because you're talking about. Or let me back up. The book that prompted me to write "The Moment That Defines Your Life" was the book Meditations.
Oh,
Marcus Aurelius was a Roman
I've read
emperor, the
that
most
too.
powerful. Yeah, it was beautiful, and he wrote it. He was journaling. Nobody knows if he intended this to be read. What they're certain of it, he wrote this down for his own self reflections. The way, to your point, you started to journal.
Mm,
I have to believe Marcus Aurelius found it cathartic the way you did, that it was brought you peace and it allowed you to take all that jumble in our mind, the traffic jam in our head, to
mm,
be able to bring some organization to it, to put it down on the paper. And then when we read it back, how do we feel? We feel better. It has to come out. We have to find a place to put it. And you want to put it in a place that is productive, but also recognizing, is there someone else here that could benefit from this? Likely,
absolutely,
yes. Whether you're
absolutely.
from UK, Nigeria, US, whatever, we're
Anywhere,
human beings and we need each other. And this is the
100%.
way when I found when I writing the books, I had no idea the impact they would have. And when people
Mm,
come back and said, "Oh my God, it did this, it did that, it changed my
mm.
life," blah blah blah, I was like,
And it's so
"Wow,
soothing.
right. Well, it's beautiful. That's why you're here. Is there any higher calling? No. I,
None than this.
none. My best friend's a doctor. His calling is he heals the sick. I don't know how to
Mm,
do that. I'm not wired for that. So that's
absolutely.
not a way that I would ever do that because I wouldn't be any good at it. But I'm
Yeah.
good at other things. And so we find our way to the extent that we try to bring that mind and spirit to other people.
Mm,
Sometimes it's not intentional. And in your case, it started with the journaling. Marcus
true.
Aurelius started with journaling. And when I wrote my books, it was just, it felt good to know that I can share this with someone who may perceive it as valuable and
Mm.
then pass it on. And that's what literature is. You just give somebody a book. There's no better gift than that. I don't need anything. I don't need anything else. Give me a book. I'm good.
I love your take on that, and I can relate it to what you're talking about. Like you mentioned, when you go back to it, because sometimes when I go back, one of the most yeah, I've got so many people say your books are so sad. They're like dark poetry. They're overly emotional. How do you
Mm,
write them? Most of the ones that I'm really excited that I wrote was Fate to the Dungeon of Doom, which I think was in 2020, but published 2020. I think that's the most saddest I've ever written, and it was written during my most desperate roller coaster year. So even
yeah.
currently, nowadays, when I go back, I think I wrote that when I was perhaps 20 years old. I've got a woman ask, "Yours, how old are you?" Then I think I told her I'm 21. And she was like, "You're so young, but you write like an elder, full of wisdom. Your words are so
Mm-hmm.
powerful." Okay, I'm currently 26, yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when I go over the books I've written 21, I will sit down like, how did I wrote that? That was beautiful. So
Yeah.
even currently, I may have some issues writing current in like I did in the past because things have changed. So because I love to write from a place of emotion.
Right.
That
No doubt. Yeah.
I love to, before I put up my pen and start writing, there must be something, a drive in me that sprouts out that emotion. Then the words just keep flowing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all those years are full of emotion, turbulence, etc. And I wrote 50, the 230 pages. Amazing, heartbreaking, beautiful, overly emotional, comforting, philosophic collection of poetry. And when I look back to it, like I'm excited I wrote this book. Even if I
Yeah.
get old, I have children, I have grandkids, it's still there. It's something I
Right.
can always make reference to. Like I'm excited I wrote that book. It's amazing. I don't think I can write like that currently, but I'm excited I wrote that during those years.
Yeah.
The words are powerful and so heavy. Yeah.
Well, in A Climb to the Top, there are 10 chapters. Chapter 2 is called The Power of Emotional Appeal. And the
Mm,
reason I placed it so early in the book, best speakers, the best communicators to me. So in the United States, for reference, Martin Luther King was our great orator.
yeah.
And when you listen to Martin Luther King, are you listening to the mind or are you listening to the heart? The heart wins every time. What did Martin Luther King do? He prompted and provoked a movement that changed, not just changed people, it changed our country for the better, I'd like to think. When I listened to him, Peter, it was all, it flowed, or let me back up. A wise man once taught me that, or told me, the longest journey that any human being takes is the 18 inches that separates your heart from your mind. So you think
Mm,
about just that distance. We are always in a tug of war. Do I make a decision from the mind or do I make a decision from the heart?
mm,
When I speak and when you can write from the mind or you can write from the heart. What I know, if there's another human being on the other side of this, they're going to go for the emotion every time because we want to feel, we read books to feel. I suspect if you're writing a book on anatomy, you got to teach someone the heart, the lungs. That's a mind. Okay,
yeah.
understood. But for what you do, for the poetry that you're trying to evoke that emotion so that people can have a place to put theirs, because they don't. Many people have no idea what to do with their emotion until they get angry, upset, and offend people. Well,
Yeah.
what if we can get ahead
And
of
they break the TV or smash the laptop on the floor.
smash something, smash people? They hurt people. We hurt people with our words. We hurt people with our actions.
Absolutely.
What if we had a way not to do that and still deal with the anger? Because anger is an honest emotion. There's nothing wrong with being angry. It's important because it assigns value to something.
Mm,
But that doesn't let one off the hook for behaving in a way that is destructive and offensive. And yet, for people that, even if though they don't intend to, if they don't have a method for dealing with that anger, it's going to come out and rain down on somebody.
mm,
And the moment that defines your life was my attempt to help people recognize we are all dealing with things. That's life.
absolutely.
Some
Everybody.
things are more intense than others, but
Yeah.
that book attempts to give people a guidepost, a blueprint for what happens when you get ahead of this.
Mm,
Think about how you react to the things that are beyond your control.
yeah.
And that's the philosophy of Stoicism.
Mm,
Instead of filling the mind, we clear the mind. And we recognize that it's not what happened that matters, it's our reaction to what happens and our capacity to stay calm and
mm,
to not blow up at people. And
mm,
sad things happen, but the Stoic philosopher it's a practice. So we practice it the way an athlete practices kicking a football.
mm,
And that's what I try to get out of my book and my teaching. This is just not something to fill the mind and go away.
mm.
This is something that requires intention and discipline. And who knew when I was in college? Nobody told me that mattered. All you had to do was get an A in class, and it's your path to prosperity.
Mm.
Well, it doesn't correlate, and that goes to the heart.
I mean, I love your take on this, really. I like the fact that you mentioned that some people don't know what to do with their emotion.
Yeah,
That's very, I had to write that down. And I've been taking some notes from our conversation. I have my pen and my paper here
I
beside
appreciate
me.
that. But think about what you did for your emotions. You needed a place to put it. You could have gone home and smashed the television, but no, you took a pen. That's what you said. You said, I took a pen, I put it to paper, and I began to feel differently. This was
Mm,
therapeutic. You could have taken medicine. You
yeah,
didn't. You didn't take a chemical. You took a
yeah.
pen to paper, and it became cathartic.
And I
I
like
think a lot, right? A lot of writers do that. They come
mm,
from a place of prescriptive. I'm doing this. Marcus Aurelius did that, and yet here we are with this amazing capacity to share it to someone who relates to it, and that's
yeah,
sort of when we got a good book.
yeah,
When they relate to that and they feel something, that is
yeah.
so cool.
Absolutely. I love your take. That's quite beautiful. That's very amazing. I love this. I've been enjoying this conversation so far.
Thank you. Yeah, likewise.
So, so good. And I'm really intrigued with it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, apart from the books we've mentioned so far, do you have any other works you've authored or currently working on?
Yeah, I do. There are sometimes there are books that have a big impact on you. I watch television and streaming services like anyone else.
Yeah.
And this is something that integrates our UK US world. A friend of mine, had told me, Chuck, there's a television show on Apple Plus TV called Ted Lasso. And I said, oh, what's Ted Lasso? I didn't know what it was. And somebody said to me, it stars this comedian named Jason Sudeikis, who I knew from our show in the States called Saturday Night Live. And I knew who he was, and he was a funny guy. I'd seen him in a couple movies. And somebody said to me, I think you would really like this show. And I said, why would I like this show? And I said, I'm not going to answer that. Just go watch it. And so I
Oh,
watched it. And I said, oh my God, I've never seen a television character like this.
wow.
The way his emotional intelligence was on display. Peter, have you watched Ted Lasso?
I
Have you
don't
watched the show?
actually. I barely watch movies, but that was great. I've heard about it too.
Yeah, and it had an immense impact on me. And it was
Wow.
3 seasons, and it was into the third season where I said, I've got to write about this guy. And not
Wow.
because it's a TV show, but because of the impact he had on someone like me who teaches the
Mm,
very things that he's extolling the virtues of emotional intelligence without ever using those words. His
wow.
methods, the way he connects to people, the way he speaks to them, it is right out of my playbook. And when I watched this, I said, what are the lessons that we can learn? So it's still percolating the idea, but I feel like my second book was very different from my first, which was by design. I'd like that
Mm,
next one to be very different. I don't want to reinvent what I've already done. What's the point? I want to take it to a very different place. And
yeah.
I was so enamored. Just as I used meditations as a basis of inspiration for the moment that defines your life, I can't help but think that Ted Lasso, I think about it daily. I think about the writer, whoever the intelligence and
Mm,
the human qualities the writer brought to that character. We need more of that.
wow.
So it will renew to another season, but I am thinking about how do I complement what people are going to watch on television with the leadership lessons that I can communicate on that. So that is in process now. I've also got a couple of television projects we're working on. So I'm just warming up. I feel like I've got many other ways that I can bring this body of work to people. And I'm so
Wow.
grateful for the people that are helping me in various mediums.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's very great. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. Well, I
Very,
think even for you, for us, once you become an author, I do a lot of professional speaking. I coach, so I'm very active in how I use these books. And
mm,
and when you do well and you
yeah.
care about what you're doing, it leads to other opportunities organically.
Yeah.
Not all of them have to be created out of thin air. People that you have a positive impact on want to have an impact on you. So
Mm,
they say, "Hey, did you consider? Have you tried? Do you know?" We're like, "Oh my God!" And all of a sudden, all this beautiful vibes, the positive vibes create opportunity. If you just treat
absolutely.
people with respect and you help them, it's
Yeah.
amazing what happens.
Absolutely. I love your take on this, Shukes.
Thank you.
Exciting so far. It's been great, and I love your response to these questions.
Thank you.
Very good and quite impressive. And I also wanted to ask you, what sort of advice would you give a struggling writers, and on what platform can interested viewers get a copy of your book?
Yeah, let me take the first part because I often hear writers, Peter, talking about it's torture to sit down and write. Or, God, isn't it hard? Okay,
Right off the
all
top.
right. I didn't find it that way. In fact, I found writing both books very easy because I wrote what I know.
Wow.
I'm not a fiction writer. I'm not a poetry writer. I appreciate when you're creating something from nothing.
Mm.
I'm not saying I couldn't do it. It just doesn't come naturally to me.
Yeah.
What does come naturally to me because I teach it and I speak it. When I write a book, I'm simply envisioning what it is I do when I'm communicating it orally and I put it on paper. But here's why I say this. Many of my friends who have written books tend to have perfectionist tendencies.
Mm.
And when they're writing the book, they stop and they analyze, do I put the comma here? Do I put the period here? Is it and they drive themselves crazy. And
Mm.
and when they talk about that the writing process is torturous, I'm not discounting how they feel about that process. I'm simply saying, I think before you start to write a book to any writer, get in touch before you even write one word with your methods of how you operate. And
Yeah.
if you, because I work with a lot of people who they can't forgive themselves for not being perfect. And you know, when you're writing, you're striving for progress. You'll edit it later, and then you're going to have an editor anyway, which is a very important part of any process. My first editor was amazing. He made me a better writer, and his name
Yeah.
is Peter Giannopoulos. I want to give him a shout out for this if he's listening. He was great in that it's because of him that he taught me how to write. I was writing, I didn't know what I was doing.
Wow.
But to other writers, don't start this until you are comfortable in the discomfort that you might write a piece of crap. It's okay. Just
Mm.
put it down. And you'll get to it later or bring someone into you, whether it's an editor or someone you care that cares about you, that is courageous enough to tell you the truth.
Mm.
Because you want to serve the mission of the book, not your ego. And I think many writers serve their ego first and then they worry about the mission. I'm the
Mm.
complete opposite. And maybe it's a piece of junk, but with the right partners, because a book is a collective effort, you can take some, but at least you got something to start.
Mm.
I know some people, they haven't written a page. Well, why? They got the writer's block. I feel for them. I don't know what that feels like, but just because
Wow.
I don't have that perfectionist tendency, I just start to write it and then I'll edit it and I'll have someone else edit it and then they'll give me ideas to all your writers out there or your potential writers. I think everyone has something to say.
Mm.
You just got to decide what it's worth to you and how much time you're going to dedicate to it. But
Yeah.
if it's torturous, I don't know why do it. But that's not for me to say. I don't judge it. I simply feel someone's pain. I
Mm.
just think that is a lot of what happens. And my first publisher told me many people take 3 years not to write a book. From the time they say I'm going to do it, and then they start it, and then they put it away, and then they pick it up again. That's no way to write a book. You got to find
Yeah.
a flow state, and the only way to
Yeah.
find a flow state is to start somewhere. So that's my
That's
advice.
no way.
Yeah,
I love.
and did you feel the same when you were right? Just put it down.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah,
That's a lot.
and don't fear the imperfection.
Yeah. That's an amazing advice you've got, and I'm hoping
Yeah,
viewers, even including myself, would
yeah.
love to utilize it. Now, could we have a link into the
Ah,
purchase
yes.
platforms?
My website, if you remember my name, it's Chuck Garcia. It's chuckgarcia.com. All you got to do is, or you can Google me. And you Google me, you see a whole bunch of stuff. I never thought I'd Google myself, but when I do, the books come up. And I never thought, Peter, when I Google myself, the first thing that comes up is author. I never thought
You were
that. So,
like, oops, Google
oh, that's
recognized me
me?
as an author.
Right. I can't say I'm a writer. I'm certainly not a professional writer. I am an author and a very proud one, but it's all to support my clients and my business and my teaching. As to the platforms, always on LinkedIn. You can go to Chuck Garcia on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active because that's the business network that I live in. I do have an Instagram account. You can use Chuck Garcia or A Climb to the Top, either one of those. And that's where we'll post certainly the show. And my branding company is called Two Market Media. They will assist me in the distribution of this. But best way to find me, just go to chuckgarcia.com. There's a big blue button that says contact. Hit the button, write me a note, tell me how I can help, and we'll start the dialogue from there.
That's great. That's amazing. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Chuck Garcia books directly on
Indeed.
Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles on his website and also on other platforms. I also
Right.
left a link to social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Chuck, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. I must say
It's
this
my
is more
pleasure.
than awesome, very great and exciting, and very educative as well, and inspiring too. Having this conversation with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
I appreciate that, Peter. I'm really glad you connected with me. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to collaborate with you, and I hope we have another opportunity to do it. But to your listeners, thank you for taking the time to listen to us, and to you, Peter, keep up the good work. This is a wonderful show, and I am very proud to have been a part of it.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure as well, really.